Hello, my friends. Thank you for tuning in to Weird Mythic Podcast. Yay! Well, I hope everybody has had a great day today. It is a Monday, and I hope everybody has been having a good Pride Month. I finally went to a Pride event instead of just, watching the parade or whatever. And thank you, Mama Lisa, for taking me. It was a hell of a good weekend. The Pride event was a lot of fun. I got to see really cool drag shows, freaking hilarious. And I just like seeing everybody dressed up and all the rainbows. I love rainbows. So this was a lot of fun, smiling faces, people being themselves. And I really got to step my game up next year if I go because I was not dressed cute enough. I need to step that up. But I am like super excited to start this new series, you guys. I'm going to be talking about giants. I know I covered fairies already, so I wanted to kind of go in the opposite direction of that. I just got done watching that movie Troll, which was on Netflix, came out in 2011. Definitely recommend everybody go watch if you're into foreign films, especially ones that are more fantasy based, but also not so fantasy. Like, how would I describe it? Because they're not out there really looking for trolls, technically. Anyways, everybody go see it. It's based in Norway. So you will have to use subtitles unless you speak Norwegian, which I don't. But it's called Trolls. It's on Netflix. Came out in 2011. And as I was watching that, I'm like, I already like giants, like the history, the stories about people finding the skeletons in North America, all the folklore around giants. I really find it fascinating. Most of the ones that were found in North America were like rediscovered or unearthed in the late 1800s. And I've always been curious about why that was and all the conspiracies that surround that. And I just think it's fun and we should just get into it, right? We'll just get into it. So this episode, I am going to be talking about giants specifically in North America that were rediscovered in the 1800s, mainly in the late 1800s. I do have one that's from the 1700s though that I did find that's pretty cool. I'm also going to be talking a lot about like Native American stories about the giants that were here in North America. As I said, what really got me interested in giants is really just the fairy tales behind it. Just flat out all the fairy tales in all the movies. I love the idea of 10-foot tall people or even people the size of buildings. It's just amazing. And then when, I started finding articles and whatnot and watching stuff on TV about archaeologists finding giant skeletons in North America, I just got excited as like a kid and in high school because I'm like, we don't have anything in North America that's really exciting. We don't have pyramids and shit like that. But we got giant skeletons. And I've always wanted to see these skeletons. But now, after doing my research and knowing that most of the skeletons are now not for public display, I'll probably never be able to see these giant skeletons. But I totally understand why. Because any giant skeletons that once were in museums needed to go back to Native Americans, which is the right thing to do since the giants were found at sacred burial sites, and specifically the burial mounds. If you don't know what the burial mounds is, I'll of course post a picture of it just so you have like an image, but they're like sacred mounds used to cover and bury something sacred, and a lot of that was being practiced in North America. The sacred mounds that the Indians created were used as a burial site and possibly other things. And I'll have to dedicate like a whole episode to like Serpent Mound because that's something that I've always wanted to see and I can actually go to that physical site and see it someday. But all of the mounds and all of the burial sites should not have even been excavated in the first place. So I'm glad that the US government and the Smithsonian did give all of those skeletons and artifacts back to the Native Americans because that's definitely the right thing to do. We shouldn't be excavating people's burial sites. Come on, people. Anyways, there has been over 1,000 accounts of 7+ tall skeletons found since the 1800s. The Smithsonian had about 17 of those giant skeletons that stood well over 7 feet tall back in 1873. One in particular was an 8-foot tall skeleton with a skull. This skull that this skeleton, had, the head, was 36 inches in circumference. Now, the average adult, whatever an average adult is only about 20 inches in circumference. So this is much bigger. That specific skeleton with the 36-inch circumference of a skull was found in Ann, Illinois. Now, those 17 giant skeletons that were at the Smithsonian were given back to Native Americans for the Native American Graves Protection and Reparation Act, or Reparation Act. Might be pronouncing that wrong, but anyways, needed to give it back. But the Smithsonian did have 17 of those back in the late 1800s on display for everyone to see, and people did see these. And they were excavated by archaeologists, so these aren't just like me going out and finding a skeleton and giving it to a museum. No, these were from specific archaeologists that found them and gave them to the museum after doing their own type of research on where it was found and what these were. The earliest account that I found was from actually 1833, but it's about a finding from 1819. Cover up? Maybe, maybe not. This was in Lompoc Rancho, California in 1819, which is off the coast of Santa Barbara. A group of soldiers were digging a pit and hacked their way through a level of gravel as they were digging this pit. Now, gravel isn't 12 feet under. Like, they were like a good 10 to 12 feet under and then came across gravel. That's not how this works, which means that the gravel was put there. As they got all the gravel out, they found a 12-foot long sarcophagus. Inside this sarcophagus was a skeleton that was just under 12 feet tall. So he's pretty freaking close to being 12 feet. In the sarcophagus with the giant skeleton were also shells, stone axes, spears, and a thin sheet of purple quartz. This skeleton also had 2 rows of teeth. In the report, the soldiers also talked to the local Indians in the area when they found it. And as they were talking to the Indians and the Indians were talking about the giant that they found, a couple of them went into this trance. And that's what it's described as. The Indians went into a trance. And they said that those remains of that 12-foot tall skeleton were actually displaced. This was not the original burial site in California, and it was originally from the Allegaway Indians, who are from the Ohio Valley. After that, the skeleton was reburied. So this skeleton, sometime before 1819, was moved to California for some reason. Nothing ever said why it was moved in the first place, but these soldiers just buried it back. So it might still be there. I couldn't find anything else besides that on that skeleton, but that's 12 foot. Okay, that's a huge person. I'm really going to try to go in chronological order of the years these giants were found. So one of the other ones, and some of them I don't have a whole lot of like information on, but there's accounts, there's reports, and it all just says pretty much the same thing, that it was found here at this time, and that's about it. So, but I am going to go in chronological order. In West Hickory, Pennsylvania, there is a newspaper article from the Oil City Times that was published in 1870. And then that report from 1870 in the Oil City Times that a 18-foot skeleton was found in West Hickory, Pennsylvania. In 1890, the Serpent Mound, which I'll have to do a whole episode on, which is in Adams County, Ohio, there is over a 13-foot long shape of a serpent here, guys, and the mound is about 2,300 years old. And as I said, in 1890, there was a skeleton found by a Professor Frederick Ward Putnam, who was excavating the mounds. He found a 7-foot tall skeleton. In Deerfield, Massachusetts, in 1895, there is a record of an 8-foot tall skeleton with 2 rows of teeth. In 1897, there was a 7-foot 6-inch skeleton found in the Iowa mounds. Beaver Lake in the Ozark Caves in Arkansas, there was a 10-foot skeleton found in 1913. Now, this is from an article called The New Age Magazine, Volume 18, and it was written by reporter Victor Schaffelmerit. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But in the Ozarks, they did find a 10-foot tall skeleton in 1913. Let's go to the Catalina Islands, going back to California. There is a Dr. Furstenand. He unearthed an 8-foot tall skeleton with some artifacts with it, which was mainly a motor and pestle and some arrowheads. After Dr. Furstenand found that 8-foot tall skeleton at the Catalina Island, a man named Ralph Glidden continued to dig. So there's this report that Ralph Glidden unearthed 3,781 skeletons from the Channel Islands from the years 1919 to 1930. All of them are reported to be giants, that they were all 9 foot 2 inches tall, if not taller, and some were just well over 7 feet. Dr. Glidden and his team also found femur bones that measured up to 28 inches, which would make a person over 8 feet tall. I could not find anything to say that those 3,781 skeletons were 100% all over 7 feet, but in this specific article, all of them were between 7 and 9 feet tall, most of them 9 feet. That is freaking wild. I have everything in the show notes, guys, but it was really hard to find specifically that 3,000. But I did find just a few of the articles that did say, yeah, they found thousands of these there. Couldn't find anything of what they did with those skeletons. I'm hoping they put them back. In 1933, in Stillville, Missouri, an 8-foot tall skeleton was found. That same year, Cresapes Mound in West Virginia, a Dr. Donald Dragoo excavated a 7-foot 2-inch tall skeleton. He was quoted by saying that the bones were extremely heavy. Now, the most recent giant skeleton that was found was actually in 2012, and this was in Miamisburg, which is in Montgomery County in Ohio. An 8-foot tall skeleton was found, and the archaeologists believe that it was from the Adena culture, which was from about 1,000 to 200 BCE. So this is thousands of years old, 8-foot tall skeleton. So you might be thinking at this point, 7 to 8 foot tall humans are not totally unheard of in today's world, which I agree. They're not like giants, but they are giant people. You also need to keep in mind that the Native Americans in the Ohio Valley and in West Virginia were not over 6 foot tall. So in their time, 7 to 8 foot tall humans would 100% be giants. But I have some newspaper articles that do report on even bigger skeletons. Both of these reports that I found were from the year 1845. Both of them were also in December. So one of the skeletons, there's a report from the Lancaster Examiner that reported an 18-foot tall skeleton was unearthed 60 feet below the Earth's surface. Now, this 18-foot skeleton weighed out to 1,500 pounds. You got to think that just the bones weighed 1,500 pounds, you guys. 18 foot tall. Could you imagine if there was muscle, fat, clothing on this 18-foot tall person? It was much well over 1,500 pounds. That is, I don't even have words to if I saw that in real life, crazy. That same year, 1845, the Milwaukie Semi-Weekly Gazette reported that there was a 20-foot skeleton found. So we got 2 reports from 1845 that show well over 18-foot tall skeletons were in West Virginia, Ohio Valley. Speaking of West Virginia, because that's the ones in West Virginia are the ones that I'm more familiar with. This is what kind of got me started into this episode, was the fact that I was there's giants in West Virginia. Who fucking knew? So the first report of finding giants in West Virginia were, of course, the coal miners. 1774, a man named Jack Parsons was on the Cheat River and saw what looked like a bone. And he was right. There was a bone there. He saw a femur. And this femur was 7 inches longer than his own. Jack decided to continue to dig, and he found more. He found the rest of the skeleton, which when he laid it out, it was about 8 feet, if not longer. A group excavating the Grave Creek Mounds, which is now present-day Moundsville, West Virginia, they found more than one 8-foot-tall skeleton in 1838. In East Fairmount, West Virginia, there were some workers who found 2 skeletons in 1850. Originally, they said that they found these skeletons and they were 8 feet tall, but they were quickly stolen. 7 years later, these same skeletons were found, and there's a report from the Western Library Messenger that stated that they were actually 10 feet tall, not 8. During the construction of the Paw Paw Creek Bridge in 1875, workers uncovered 3 skeletons that were well over 8 feet tall with red hair. In 1882, an archaeologist by the name of F.M. Fetty and his wife were exploring around White Creek in Marion County when they saw what looked like some sort of ancient shelter, so they decided to go ahead and investigate. After a little bit more of digging, they found a large mummy sitting in a chair surrounded by stones and flint artifacts. A year later, on the same creek, 1883, White Creek, a man named James Faulkner unearthed a giant skeleton that was 7 feet 4 inches long. The Smithsonian Institute decided to start a dig after that find, and they started digging at Creole Mound. And they dug 50 different mounds. Again, this is 1883. The team uncovered multiple giants for the Smithsonian. Many were 7 feet 6 inches long, and their bodies were decorated in heavy copper and beads along their wrists with large plates of mica on their shoulders. Some had pipes or spearheads buried with them. One of the mounds did have 10 skeletons surrounding one giant skeleton, which was something they only found at that one mound. And a few of the skeletons had completely flat heads, and they were not rounded on the back. After this dig, the Smithsonian had another dig in Wheeling, West Virginia, where they found a group of giant skeletons around the heights of 6'7" and 7'6", with unusual skulls, low foreheads with very prominent backs. In an article from the Charleston Daily Mail, published in 1922, there was another dig at Mound Park at Grave Creek Mound that the archaeologists found a female. This was the only article that I found that specifically said female giant, and she was 7 foot 4 inches tall. In 1930, the Clarksburg Sunday Exponent reported, quote, "Interesting and valuable evidence of a race of gigantic people who inhabited this section of West Virginia more than 1,000 years ago have been exhumed from two newly explored mounds located near Morganville, which is the Northwestern Turnpike, about 12 miles west of Salem." This same article states that a Professor Ernest Sutton dug 2 mounds in Doddridge County and uncovered 4 skeletons. Sorry, that was a whole bunch of words there, guys. Pretty much, they kept finding more and more skeletons in West Virginia, all ranging from 7 or more foot tall. All right. What do all of these findings have in common? And I found at least 5 things that they all have in common. One is that they were all at burial mounds. They were all in some sort of stone or wooden coffins, at least like covered, not maybe inside a coffin, but they were covered with a stone or wood along with some artifacts around them. Many of those skeletons also had double rows of teeth or just a whole bunch of extra teeth, mainly in the Ohio Valley and West Virginia. And about half of the ones that I read had elongated skulls. All right, so let's get into what the Native Americans believe and some of their folklore, which I don't think is really folklore. There's a story from the Mohegan tribe about a giant named Moshup. Moshup married one of the little people, and her name was Granny Squannet. She was the leader of the magical woodland little people. The reason why Granny Squannet and Moshup got married was so that there would be balance in the world. So you have the little people with the giants. One story of Moshup is when he was building a bridge and was bit by a crab. Moshup got so mad that he stomped his feet and threw stones all over the state of Connecticut, which is why there are so many rocks there, which I don't know if there are or not, but I've never been in Connecticut. Someone enlighten me. Maybe there is. The Mohegan tribe believes that Moshup and other giants also turn into whales. Moshup also lived among the Wampanoag Indians on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. He would sit on top of the hills and overlook everything. Apparently, there's this big crater near the town of Gayhead that looks like a seat, and that is said where Moshup used to sit. Moshup also used to eat whales. He would throw stones into the ocean, walk across those stones to catch the whales by hand. It is believed that the rocks between Cuttyhunk and Devil's Bridge are those rocks that Moshup threw so he could walk out and get the whales. Moshup is said to be responsible for the shape of Martha's Vineyard. He lived on the cliffs of the Aquana, and after catching the whales, he would throw them against the side of the mountain. Now today, when you look at those cliffs, you will see that some of the rocks are red while the rest are black. Legend says that the red is actually the dry whale blood, and the black is from when Moshup would start fires. He would also share the meat with the Wampanoag Indians and the Mohegan tribes as well. Moshup would use the trees from the surrounding areas to make the whales, cook, stay warm, build a shelter. And that is why there are not so many tall trees in Gayhead. The Wampanoag have a story of when they gifted Moshup with some tobacco, and he smoked it out of the pipe that he made. And then he had to ash, the pipe, and he ashed it into the water. And apparently that is how the island of Nantucket came to be. I have a little hole to poke in the story, though, considering that tobacco wasn't introduced into North America until the 1800s, but still a really cool story. My favorite story of Moshup is that one day he went to the Indians and told them that there was a new type of man coming with fair skin. He warned them not to let the new man onto their land. After he warned the Indians of the new man, he went into the bay and was never seen again. They do believe that he turned into a whale. The Northern Paiute tribe have a legend of another tribe called the Seeteequah. Now, the Northern Paiutes used to fight them, and according to them, that they fought them, drove them out, and killed them. The Seeteequah were known to be giants with red hair. Yes, like the giants that were found in the 1800s with red hair. They were also known to be cannibals. In 1911 and 1912, there were many artifacts and even mummied humans discovered in the Lovelock Cave in Nevada. And that is where the last known battle between the Northern Paiutes and the Seeteequah was. Let's go all the way back, guys, all the way back to 1608. When the colonist guy, when the colonist guy, John Smith, and others landed at the Chesapeake Bay, they came into contact with the Susquehannocks Indians. I might be pronouncing that totally wrong because I said Susquehannocks, and it is Susquehannock. I might be pronouncing that wrong. But the Susquehannocks Indians. The colonist and John Smith described them as giants, well over 7 foot tall. Now in 1991, Marshall Beckers did some research on the 16th century Native Americans, and he found out that the Susquehannock tribe were actually a lot taller than most Native Americans. The Choctaw tribe has a story on how the prairies and banks of the Tombigbee River were formed. It's formed by the giants Nahalo, and the mammoths that used to walk around the area. The Nahulo was a race of giant people. They would break the low limbs of trees to eat the leaves or bark, which caused the trees to die. Hence why there's no trees on the prairie. The Choctaw would fight against the Nahulo, but one day the Great Spirit came down from the sky to help the Choctaw, and the Great Spirit set the Nahulo on fire. We have even more stories of giants living or being around Native Americans. The Cherokee had the Moon People. The Utes and the Paiutes had a race of 10-foot tall cannibals living in caves. The Choctaws had accounts of giants living in the Ohio Valley. The Navajo had legends of the Starnik people, who was a race of white giants that used to enslave the Indians to dig in their mines. And they were well over 7 feet tall. They ended up dying off, though, or went back to heaven, according to the Navajo. So I started to think that if no one started to dig up those sacred burial sites and saw the giant skeletons, would all the Native American stories just stay that way, just be stories? The fact that the Native Americans already knew about giants that lived in North America and knew they died out, would the rest of us just leave it to be fables? I would think we did, but they were dug up, and we do know them to be true, even though giants are considered a pseudoscience, or for those some scientists that do believe that there could have been a giant race of people, that they're an anomaly. I had a physical anthropology teacher in community college. Hella fun class, by the way. Everyone should take that. But on the first day of class, he straight up said, quote, "We will not be discussing pygmies or giants," unquote. Like, I will never forget that. I was like 22, and I'm like, you're not even going to mention giants or pygmies? No, he straight up said, because they're both anomalies. But that man never denied the existence of giants, or pygmies for that matter. So what do you guys think? I straight up believe that giant people existed. I really wish we could see the evidence, but I totally respect why the Native Americans don't have their ancestors in museums. Nobody wants that for people that they cared about to protect their heritage. It's not something to put on display. But I would really like to know what you guys think. I have so many other articles that I want to read. I'm going to post everything that I found in my show notes. Let me know what you guys think about giants. If you know of anything else from Native Americans or anything else from around the world, I have a couple more episodes coming out about giants. But go to all my social media. Go to Weird Mythic Podcast on Twitter. Go to Weird Mythic Podcast on Instagram, which has all of my links to the websites and merch, which, by the way, I will have to start doing some new merch because I got somebody to redo a little cartoon logo thing for me. Thank you, Brianna. I will be putting your information in my show notes as well. Go to Weird Mythic Podcast on YouTube and send me stories, encounters, send me ideas for episodes, give me your feedback. Send all of that information to weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com. Bye.